Hello. Now, hopefully, I am live, but it's always very hard to tell, especially when I'm having all kinds of strange problems with my streaming setup. So, hopefully, someone will pop in soon enough and will be able to let me know if I am live. I'm going to check myself as well and see if I can see myself. Let's have a look. I am live. Okay, fantastic. Fantastic. I'm here today, Jordan Sorcery's GW Book Club. Today we're going to be talking about Dark Future, Route 666. So, if you are not familiar with Dark Future, this was a Games Workshop game series, a book series and a game that came out in the late 80s. Very, very fun. Hello, Kier, Wookie, Matt. Thank you for letting me know that I am live. I'm very pleased to hear it. all sorts of technical challenges today for whatever reason. So apologies that we're starting a little bit later than intended. But yes, hopefully we'll be able to go ahead. I'm very aware that there's a weird sort of space at the side of the streaming screen. That is because I haven't sorted out any more visuals that I was going to put up on screen. So all sorts of classic technical errors, exactly what you'd expect from a Jordan Sorcery live stream. We never quite, I think we got to a place where it was relatively stable and consistent. That was a brief period, and then we've just ended up with nothing but challenges for every live stream since. So I'm hoping that the rest of this live stream goes okay, and that future live streams go okay, and that I've ironed out some of the kinks. I think what I need to do is set aside some time to just come in and spend a load of time setting up my live stream tech. I think I've gotten complacent and I've let it get all out of hand and it's all broken. So that's on me. But yes, we're here today. We're talking about Route 666, which is the final Dark Future novel. So this is written by Jack Yeovil, who is actually Kim Newman. Jack Yeovil was a pseudonym that he wrote his Games Workshop books under in the late 80s, early 90s. Dark Future is very much inspired by Mad Max and Blade Runner and a lot of other sort of dystopian future fiction. And it is a world where the middle of America has become a dust bowl. It's become a desert. Massive mega corporations rule the cities, and then in between them, where all of the sort of shipments have to go across land, it is just like the Wild West. It's back to being sort of a dangerous crossing to get from one city to another city. So yeah, it's a fantastic setting. They released a single game called Dark Future. As a big boxed game in, I think it was 89, designed by Richard Halliwell with a world that was designed by Mark Gascoigne. Oh dear, I just got a notification that suggests that I've gone offline. But am I still live? Can anyone still hear me? Let's find out. Have I come back online? Tell me, folks, am I still live? I'm going to, hopefully this is not something that I have to check every few minutes. But I did just get a notification that suggests that I did go offline briefly and then it reopened. So fingers crossed. It looks like I'm still live. Okay, yes, you can still hear me. Thank you. Good Lord. Hopefully, guys, I won't have to continuously double check that we're still live. Hopefully it's stable enough and it gets us through this conversation. But yes, okay, so we're talking Dark Future. It is a fantastic setting. Mark Gascoigne sort of developed it originally as a role-playing game. The role-playing game was never made, which is very sad, I think, because it's such a fantastic setting. Yes, there are lots of other games that sort of touch on similar elements, and there are movies and there are books, and there's all kinds of stuff that sort of crosses over and has similar influences and stuff. But this book series that Kim Newman primarily was responsible for, oh man, what an amazing set of novels. Just an incredible story. It's bittersweet because we will never get the end of his planned storyline. But we've got sort of 4 novels, essentially. I think 3 of which are his alone. So you start with a short story called Route 666, which establishes some of the key players and the bad guy, the main bad guy in the series. You then get Demon Download, which introduces the sort of a lot more of the technology and some of this other sort of wider world that's happening out there. So you see the Vatican and what that's doing in this sort of Mad Max future, and you see a little bit more about Europe and the rest of the world. And then you get Crocodile Tears, which is about one of our sort of prophesied heroes, who was a character who was first introduced. So first introduced in the Route 666 short story. And that character is Jezebel. She has multiple names. She becomes Crocodile later on. But she is a sort of prophesied kind of character who is come up from nothing, has been a gang member, and is going to fight against this big evil Elder Seth, who is a kind of... They're called the Josephites. They're very much inspired by the Mormon church and Mormon settlers and sort of pilgrims. But it is a much more dystopian, sort of dark world. There is dark powers, Nurgle and Tzeentch and Cthulhu and Nyarlathotep and others like that. Gods, these dark gods from space, have all been mentioned. So these eldritch powers are all out there, and Elder Seth is trying to summon them all to the world, and Crocodile and other heroes will all assemble to combat them and stop this from happening. And that is the Demon Download cycle. The series of 4 novels that we got, which has a 5th finale that was never released. So Crocodile Tears, that is the 3rd story, and then you get Comeback Tour, which introduces Elvis, who is the Elvis of our world, but he went back into the military instead of quitting, instead of becoming a musician. He went on a 20-year tour of duty. He comes out into this dystopian world where America is not what it once was, and he becomes what's called a sanctioned operative, which is him out on the roads, very much like Mad Max in the first Mad Max film, kind of like a privatized police officer. There's gangs who are riding their motorbikes and vehicles and tankers and all this kind of stuff, doing all of their crimes across the sort of Dust Bowl in the center of America. And Elvis is an operative who sort of finds missing kids and helps people out. He's a good guy in a land where there are not many good guys left. So that's where the story essentially ends. But Kim Newman was brought back in by Games Workshop and Box Tree when they decided to republish the novels. So the original series of novels in 89 to 91, we only get a number of those released during that initial run when Games Workshop is trying its hand at publishing. That experiment is cancelled in 1991. No more books are released. A load of books are cancelled that had been commissioned. They never get released ever. Some stories eventually make it out underneath the Black Library. But in the early 90s, that project is consigned to the dustbin. Essentially a casualty of the management takeover. So Games Workshop has been taken over by Tom Kirby and a management buyout. Brian Ansell is out. It was Ansell who was looking at doing all of these kinds of weird experimentations, wonderful ideas about expanding what Games Workshop does and building the worlds and having all of this cool stuff like novels. With him gone and with money tight, they decide to get rid of that. So the book line is gone. GW Books is folded. A couple of years later, Box Tree like the look of the license, and they're going to publish it as a third party. So they take all of the published novels, the 17 books and short story collections that have already been published by GW Books, and they republish those. They finish a couple of the series that had first installments. So Ian Watson's stories get completed. He gets his Inquisitor trilogy. You also get the end of the Conrad trilogy as well. And we then sadly, instead of getting the final part of the Dark Future cycle, we get a rewritten and expanded novel based on the short story Route 666. So hopefully you're still with me here. So Kim Newman has said that essentially because it starts from a short story, his cycle of what would have been 5 novels was kind of confusing to some people. They weren't sure where characters came from. They didn't really understand the beginning of the story. So rather than jump straight to completing it, when Boxtree took over the license, he wanted to go back and ease people in a little bit. So we assume that there was still a plan to do that final novel. But he wants to take his short story and turn that into a full-length book. So that is what this is, Route 666. You may have seen a different version of Dark Future Route 666 with a Simon Beasley cover instead. That is the short story collection. It includes Kim Newman's short story, Route 666. It's a really good short story. But this is just a full dedicated novel. So this expands it out to full 240 odd pages. I'm just going to double check who did the cover for this. So this cover is by Oliver Frey, who I'm not that familiar with. Someone did point out to me the other day that this very similar to recent stuff we've seen with Fallout. So this is the US Cavalry. They wear blue and yellow. Obviously, quite similar to the jumpsuits in Fallout. Very similar to the actual, well, at least Western movies versions of US Cavalry. I assume that's based on some real life history as well. But yeah, this is a full, I want to say feature-length novel, expanding that short story. That's probably not the right term, but taking a novella, turning it into a novel, a really interesting idea, I think. So we get a proper part one to the story, even though we never get the actual finale. So, again, and it's often the way with Dark Future, it's kind of bittersweet. So for me, I'd never read the Dark Future books until starting the GW Book Club a number of years ago, and I've now read them all. So this was the end of that end of that journey for me, and I've literally read them in publication order. So it's been a really interesting experience, I think. In order to... Because he's expanded it, because Kim Newman has gone back and expanded things, I'd be really interested to know what this book reads like if this is your first exposure to the Dark Future series. Because a lot of stuff in here, I think, benefits from having read the whole series to this point. Right, we'll come back to that idea. Let's start by just talking about what this book is about. And essentially it's kind of bitty in a way. The short story essentially followed a group of US cavalry. So what was the mounted cavalry? In the Dark Future, the US cavalry still exists, but they're obviously mounted in vehicles. They are in amazing high-tech Knight Rider style cars, and they're riding motorbikes. And the US cavalry is sort of partially still a governmental organization, but they do a lot of work with private companies. So there's been a lot of privatized law enforcement in the future. Those are the sanctioned operatives. And then the US cavalry work with them in a lot of different ways. But they're essentially still a government body in the US, but the government of the US is extremely corrupt, has been completely taken over by vested interests and massive corporations. It's essentially not a democracy. It's fantastic satire. There is so much stuff in this book that is so prescient and kind of shockingly relevant. Reading through it now, like over the last few days, there is so much stuff where it's like, oh my gosh, it's as if Kim Newman could see the future. And I don't want to be too alarmist or anything, but it's really fascinating how much stuff he identifies, even down to like the way in which social media and streaming works. There are hints in here. There's nothing as explicit as like, oh, there's going to be a Twitter or there's going to be Twitch or whatever. But there is stuff around like the ultra commercialization of instant communication and the way in which like news is delivered. There is stuff in this book that is basically like Joe Rogan podcasts and like that kind of, if you like the manosphere stuff where it's like ultra macho debate podcasts, like it's literally in this book from 1993. It could absolutely have been written today and it would still be a relevant sort of dystopian future from this point. It is incredible. But we're following these US cavalry officers. They themselves are following this pilgrim train, a wagon trail of Josephite brethren. And the Josephites are a sort of religious sect who are following this very mysterious character called Elder Seth, and he is stony-faced. He sort of shows no emotion whatsoever. He's very, very creepy, very powerful figure, and he is just completely intent on getting into the middle of Utah. They want to go and resettle Salt Lake City, which is now a ghost town. All of that area is just desert, and it's taken over by gangs and very dangerous people. And these pilgrims are going out. They've got no weaponry. They're just going to make their way to Salt Lake City, and they're going to resettle it, and they're going to create their new Josephite sort of. They're going to build their shining city in the desert. So that is their intentions. You very quickly get the impression that Elder Seth is actually quite happy for a lot of his own followers to be killed on this pilgrimage, on this journey. That's part of the reason they have no weapons, because they're quite happy to make blood sacrifices. The followers don't necessarily know this, but Elder Seth absolutely is quite happy for his people to be killed off one by one on this journey, because every single death, every single faithful follower who dies on the tarmac is essentially, it's a ritual. It is a sacrifice made to these dark gods, these dark powers. Unbeknownst to the US cavalry, they're following in the trail of these pilgrims, and the pilgrims themselves have been attacked by a gang. It is a gang of like robots, sort of almost. I think they're called the Rock'em Knock'em robots, and they are all of these different cyborgs who have been made up to look like universal monsters. So there's a Frankensteinberg, and there's a guy who looks like Boris Karloff, and there's all of these sort of monster people. So it is really these Rock'em Sock'ems. Or Rock'em Knock'ems, the robot guys, they've killed a couple of the brethren, and then they've gone off about their thing. The pilgrims are continuing on their journey. The US cavalry have found these bodies, and they're like, okay, these pilgrims are in danger. Let's follow them, catch up with them, and then help them out, because they shouldn't be out here in the deserts because it's so dangerous. So that's kind of the setup, essentially. There's so much good stuff in here. It's absolutely fantastic. Lewis, they never republished the Route 666 anthology or Brian Craig's Ghost Dancers. Box Tree are clearly only into Yeovil's version of Dark Future. Yeah, it's very interesting, actually. So, as Lewis says, that anthology version with the short story, the original short story that Jack Yeovil or Kim Newman wrote, that didn't get republished. So if you want to get hold of that set of short stories, I don't know if it's been republished anywhere else, whether it's I think they may have released it with the video game that came out a couple of years ago and stuff like that, possibly. But essentially, there's a load of different versions or different angles on the Dark Future universe in that anthology of short stories. A lot of different authors. And there's also one novel, which is Ghost Dancers by Brian Craig, who also wrote the Orfeo stories for Warhammer Fantasy, which I think is quite nice and complementary to the Jack Yeovil stories. So it's a shame that that's not actually available, because it's not the best anthology. There's a few weak stories, for me at least. There's a few weak stories in that short story collection, but there's a few that are really good, and a couple that really set the tone for the world, including obviously the 666. But in this particular book, I mean, as you say, Plucky, a religious leader not being bothered about their followers being killed off, what work of fiction is this? Yeah, and this is just one part of the sort of prescient, kind of very relevant aspects of what we're seeing here in this particular story. It's uncanny, genuinely. I think some of it is frighteningly so, because you sort of see because this is a world that's so full of corruption. This is a place that's so, it's just completely lost. It is in the same way as Warhammer's worlds. It is in its end times. This is it's set in 1995. This cycle was supposed to go up to the year 2000, and it is the end times of this world. It is the arrival of dark powers, and the final heroes will unite to either save or fail to save the entire world. And the world is on the precipice of destruction, mostly because of its own actions. And this is something that you get in this book that you don't get in the short story. A lot of the expanded material, so where Newman has gone back and bulked it out into a full novel, is he's added a lot of material to do more world building, essentially. So you get loads more in here about what happened to the Soviet Union and what happened to other parts of the world and like culture, pop culture, and why things are the way they are. You get more of America's history and how Richard Nixon, who was president instead of JFK because JFK got caught having an affair with Marilyn Monroe. So he and Jackie Kennedy had a very public divorce and the breakdown of their marriage. So he never wins the election. So Nixon takes over, and then Nixon basically sells out the American government. It all becomes about private interests, and then that is the sort of beginning of the move towards American power and importance sort of becoming less relevant on the global stage. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union has a very different history to what happens. They become more democratic and they sort of open up to more culture and they become the kind of happy place. And there's actually lines in here about how the way in which the Soviet Union went, they kind of fell into capitalism and stopped caring about anything other than luxuries and kind of that sort of stuff. So yeah, it ends up being it is a really interesting sort of alternate history that still brings you to, obviously not the same place. We're not living in a sort of Mad Max world right now yet. But it's fascinating. It's fascinating how someone could be writing that in 95 and be pulling out a load of cultural ideas and sort of, this is where things could go if you walked a certain dangerous line politically and economically. So it's incredible world. John, so sad that the final Dark Future book in the series was never published. They were some of my favourite Kim Newman books, and better than anything he's written this millennium. I mean, I still haven't read a lot of his non-Games Workshop material. I have now bought a load of them. They're on the shelf. I've been able to find like the editions that I really like the look of. I haven't sat down to actually to read them yet. I'm very much looking forward. I've got Anno Dracula ready to go. I've got Orgy of the Blood Parasites, which I'm very excited to give a read. I can't wait for that one, which is one of his first ones, one of his earliest. It's not his actual earliest, but one of his was originally intended to be like a sort of exploitation horror movie style thing. That is a novel. So yeah, it sounds very fun. I'm looking forward to it. But he's so good. He's really, really good. And a lot of his short stories are really good as well, outside of Games Workshop stuff. But there's loads of changes. It's really interesting, I think, in this book because, like I say, reading it after having read all of the other Dark Future material, you then come to this one, and it's full of retcons. A lot of them are really mild, and a lot of them do slot in to just missing quiet moments in the short story. But there are things that are explicitly changed in this book, not just to make this book longer and sort of work as its own story in a better way, but there is also stuff, I think, that tells us probably or a little bit more about what might have happened in the US cavalry, which was going to be the final story, the final part of the cycle. Because there are characters who are introduced in this book who are not in the short story and presumably are placed there because they will be relevant in the final part. So there's another member of Jazbo, who in this story is a member of one of the gang cults, the Psychopomps. They also attack the Pilgrims. Now, this is a change from the short story. In the short story, the Psychopomps attack the Pilgrims, and they kill a couple of the Pilgrims on the road, and then they kill a couple of others later on, and then there's a big showdown. In the novel, it's these Rock'em Sock'em robots who kill who are the first gang to attack the Pilgrims, and then the Psychopomps come in later on. So you still get the psychopomps having that interaction, but the first interaction is changed from being psychopomps to now being these. I'm going to have to see if I can double check and find out what they were actually called. But yeah, the sort of robot guys who are cyborgs, they are introduced here. So they were not in the original version of this story. And they have a sort of a little side quest that they end up getting the US cavalry go and sort of chase them down a little bit, but they all get killed. So knock'em sock'em robots. There you go. Knock'em sock'em. So the knock'em sock'em robots, they only feature here to bring Doc Zarathustra, who is a specialist in the Gentech Bio Division. He is a character who is in that other Brian Craig book in Ghost Dancers. So that inclusion of the knock'em sock'em robots, it's fun. It's a weird sci-fi thing that wasn't in the short story previously, but it also brings in Zarathustra and kind of suggests there's something further going on. There's like a horseman, a rider, a pale rider who is out in the desert as well, who is maybe doing some stuff. So there's like all of these extra things that are added in that don't do an awful lot in this book, but are clearly here because they will be more relevant to the wider cycle. I'm pretty confident that that's what that's doing. Paul, yes, this future is pretty close and ill. Yeah, truly a dark future indeed. Paul, is there any link to the Freeway Fighter fighting fantasy book? Outside of the art being by Les Edwards, so I think I'm right in saying that Les Edwards did the cover to Freeway Fighter and also did the cover to Dark Future as well and White Line Fever. I think I'm right in saying that, but no, I don't believe there's any sort of world or sort of more substantial link between the two. I could be wrong. I've not read Freeway Fighter, so I don't know for certain, but I don't think there was a connection. That might have been earlier as well. But there could have been some inspiration, perhaps. I'm not sure. Graham, now that you've done this stream, the book will be impossible to find for the next 6 months. There's actually copies of it available. I was checking eBay for some other stuff around Dark Future. There are copies of it available on eBay. Not that I'm not selling it. Other people are selling it that would seem reasonably priced. So if you're into it, Graham, now's the right time to go for it. That's Garth Marenghi title if ever there was. That's what absolutely. I will 100%. I would be very certain and very happy to suggest that Garth Marenghi is at least in part based on a Kim Newman, right? Because Kim Newman was in those circles with all, obviously there's a lot of other authors in there as well. I forget the name. One just came to me, but it's disappeared. But yes, there's a lot of authors who were in that mixture, in that movement during that time, the late 80s, early 90s, who were absolutely the Garth Marenghi inspiration for sure. And yeah, Gray sounds more like Sean Hudson Schlock. The names alone merit a film adaptation of this. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, incredible. I can't remember what the original title was before he changed it to Orgy of the Blood Parasites, but it does sound like it should be a Garth Marenghi novel or one of his tours. Yeah, I've seen his tour actually, and his first tour, absolutely incredible, truly amazing, so funny. Yeah, really good. I was very pleased to chat to him very, very briefly at the Fighting Fantasy Fest. So he is a fan of Fighting Fantasy. So there was a fest in London 2 years ago, and yeah, he just happened to be there, and I went over and said hello because I'm such a fan of his work. He's really cool. Yeah, I really enjoy Matthew Holness and Garth Marenghi and all that stuff. It's great. But yeah, so. In this story, we've had the Knock'em Sock'em robots. They all get melted. It's an incredible scene. They're just having their party, very much inspired by Blade Runner. I mean, and you'll all know this if you've read any Jack Yeovil stuff. There are just movie references throughout. So much of the book is just, I love that movie. I'm going to place that bit of it here in this continuity. I'm going to just enjoy exploring it in a new setting. So he's taken, essentially, the replicants from Blade Runner and placed them into the world and kind of said, right, here's a group of cyborgs. They want to become the twist on it is they want to be less human. So because they're cyborgs, they still have humanoid parts, but they want to be completely robotic, and that is their sort of what they're trying to do. Unfortunately, something attacks them, and correct me if I'm wrong and I missed this in the book, but I don't believe the book tells you explicitly who did this to them. But the Knock'em Sock'em robots are attacked by some kind of it's either a weapon or a virus, or something happens to them that basically, and it's pretty gross, guys, so forgive me, but it melts their humanoid parts, so their biological parts. They are literally just turned into their constituent juices, essentially. It's gross. It's really rough. But that just leaves all of their metal bits. So all of the robotic, cybernetic parts, they just crumble and fall to the ground because all of the connective tissue is literally gone. So it's a really gruesome scene. And that is what the United States Cavalry come upon. They discover this and they find out that all of these Knock'em Sock'em robot guys have all been killed. They don't know why, and then Gentech arrive and they just take over the crime scene, and they're just like, no need for you guys to get involved. This is something we're investigating. So I feel like that is a pretty solid lead on where the story might have gone at some point in the future, how Kim Newman may have tied Gentech and Ghost Dancers and that kind of Brian Craig stuff into whatever he had planned for the final part. So you do get that. And then there's also the psychopomps themselves. They go to this town. They have... Essentially, they're there for a negotiation with a rival gang, the Daughters of the American Revolution. And they... which I think is... Because I believe that is a... If I remember my West Wing correctly, the Daughters of the American Revolution are a real organization, right? So there is this, like, they've been repurposed as a quote-unquote patriotic gang who just are absolutely in love with a certain, concept of patriotism. So they dress up like Jackie Kennedy or what have you. And that gang is a rival of the Psychopomps. So Jezebel and her rival from the Daughters of the American Revolution basically go into a gladiatorial combat, and they have an arena fight to see who's going to be in charge of a certain area of territory. And the Psychopomps win, and then that settles that particular thing. They've got the territory, so they go and celebrate in a town called Spanish Fork, which it just so happens is an area that has previously had, 200 years earlier, a complete massacre where a group of Josephites turned up and they massacred all of the Gentiles who had settled in that area, and they were led by a guy who is freakishly similar to Elder Seth, the leader of the Pilgrims in the present day. So there's all of this dark history there as well. John would recommend Back in the USSA from Newman and Eugene Byrne. It's alternate history where US has a communist revolution and Russia doesn't. Ideas used in Dark Future. So I've heard of this. Yeah, great shout, John. Thank you for raising that. I completely forgot about it. I heard of it previously, and it feels like it's absolutely a template, right? Or at least a parallel exploration of similar ideas. Because that's basically what we see in this story. When we get the broader world building, you see that there's essentially a capitalist revolution in Russia, in the Soviet Union, and things go in a completely different direction. So yeah, I definitely do need to check that out. That's a good shout. Anvil, hello. Apologies, I didn't do any of my sort of updates. I forgot to tell people on the Discord, so one of those things that forgive me. I had a load of weird technical problems at the start of the stream. Something that I hope one day I will do a stream where I don't have to apologise for technical errors, but today is not that day. So, we've got the Psychopomps. They're in Spanish Fork. That is the direction that Elder Seth is going. The US Cavalry catches up with the Brethren, the Josephites, and they sort of ask them about what's been happening. They kind of get a weird feeling from these guys, and then they're given orders to help escort the Brethren to Salt Lake City to do their resettlement. but they're going to have to go through Spanish Fork first. That brings our brethren and the US cavalry and the Psychopomps all to the same place. The Psychopomps, who had previously engaged with the brethren, they'd stolen the fancy mirror shades, which is a very odd choice, but the mirror shades that Elder Seth wears, Jezebel, when they'd first encountered him, she took his shades and had gone off with them, and they are powerful. They're a strange artifact. When you put them on, you can see the world for what it really is. You can see the dark powers. You can see the demons. You can see these magical essences. It also gives you headaches, but because of that, Elder Seth wants to catch up with the Psychopomps and wants to reclaim his mirrored shades. So you kind of get this, everything coming to a head in this town of Spanish Fork, and there is a very bloody showdown where Elder Seth just shows how incredibly powerful he is. He just completely wipes the floor with everybody, and then unleashes a load of demons. And the US cavalry, one of the officers is killed, one of the officers goes mad, two of them make it out, but one of them almost converts. She almost is sort of mind controlled to a degree and wants to join up with these Josephites. So you get there is this introduction of a rival for Jazbo amongst her own gang, and that character does join up with the Josephites. And I think that character was probably being seeded for an appearance in whatever the final story would have been, now being completely converted to the Josephite cause. So the sort of final act of the book is pretty much exactly the same as a short story. Essentially what he's done is he's expanded what was maybe the first 5 or 10 pages of the short story is now, 150 or 165 pages. And then the end is very similar to how it played out originally. But because he's introduced these new characters, you do get other scenes. I mentioned this sort of Joe Rogan podcast style thing, where there is a character who is just ultra macho, is fully on. And the other reason I think it's really reminiscent of podcasting and sort of contemporary social media and streams and all that kind of stuff is that it starts with like 3 adverts. So the host of the show is like, "Welcome to my show. We're going to have Elvis Presley debating with the head of one of the sanctioned op firms and Senator Robert Redford, and they're going to be debating, but in a minute, because we first need to talk about this product and this product and this product that you can go and buy. Now let's get on with the show." It's fully the modern podcast economy, which I thought was incredibly prescient. It's also like, this is where some of the satire comes in. That's really fun. It's and again, this is why it's so. And forgive me because I'm just repeating myself, but it feels so prescient and so perfect satire, because one of the products that this macho podcast host is selling is you can basically get a type of screen for your TV that is abusable. So you can hit it. You can throw your can of beer at it because you're angry because of what's being said by like loony lefties on your podcasts on the TV. So it like literally is, you can have a TV that you can get really angry at and smash up and damage, but it won't get damaged because it's designed to be hit. And that, like, the idea that this is like outrage TV and it's completely built around this. Obviously, I'm not suggesting that none of this actual, the sort of outrage and shock jocks and that kind of stuff didn't exist in the mid-90s. Of course it did, and it was a big thing and had been a big thing for a long time. But just the way in which it's placed into a dystopian future, I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but it feels very relevant, is all I'm saying. So you get this kind of stuff. Senator Robert Redford, obviously, he's one of the good ones. He's about like, we should get rid of like privatized police forces. We should be improving education. We should be helping people in the cities, in the police zones, rather than having all of these like wars going on in the middle of the desert. And he's in a debate going up against Elvis Presley, who's kind of like a sanctioned op, and he's like, I just want to help people, and this is how I can help people. And then the other chap is Turner from Turner Harvest Ramirez, who you may have mentioned before. You may remember from other stuff. So THR, they're talked about in the Dark Future core book, the actual core rule book. Red Harvest is a character who features in some of the advertising material for Dark Future, and she is basically the best sanctioned op in the world. So she's really, really good at her job. She's ruthless. She's just like very, very effective. And she doesn't really feature in a lot of the fiction until this book. So the short story did not feature her at all. This book features her not heavily, but she is in it a bit. She's now part of Jezebel's like own history. So she actually sort of helped her come off of the streets and was trying to give her a better route into becoming a sort of a citizen member of member of society. Jezebel joined the gang cults instead. So she's now on opposite sides from Red Harvest, and there's a bit of tension there. But they have this history of, Red Harvest trying to help her, and Red Harvest doesn't want to hurt her because she, wanted better things for her. So even though you've got Red Harvest, who's this ruthless sanctioned op, she has an emotional connection with Jezebel, who becomes Crocodile, who will be relevant at the end of the story. So I think, again, Red Harvest would have played a bigger role in whatever final version of the book, the final cycle that we would have had. Because it's interesting. I mean, this is what I really liked about this book. You get so much more stuff. If you're familiar with all of the different stories, the different characters, there's loads of extra detail here that adds layers to it. Oh, okay, that's what this character was doing. That's what Elvis Presley was doing at this point in the story before we get to Comeback Tour a few books later. So you're seeing lots of different stuff. There's loads of name drops throughout. If anybody remembers Beasts in Velvet, the Warhammer novel, it's a similar technique that Jack Yeovil or Kim Newman uses. In that book, it was very clear that he'd read all of the other Warhammer fantasy fiction up to that point and was like, okay, how can I connect this stuff together? Well, I'll name drop this person and I'll have that character appear, and I'll relate what is happening here to these other characters from these other stories. And that's what happens in the Route 666 novel. He mentions incidental characters who will be relevant in future books, which have actually are previous books, because this is the final one published. So he uses that in order to establish a load of stuff. What I'm really interested about, though, and I mentioned it before, is it works incredibly well because I know all of that stuff, and now I'm seeing extra material about it. So I'm kind of, it's a prequel that I'm watching after the sequels. Whereas if I was reading this as the first book, all of that detail would be streaming past me. I don't imagine a lot of it would take root because there's just names. So I don't know how satisfying it would be if it was the first book you were reading, because there's a load of stuff in here that you're not going to hear about for another 2 or 3 novels. You're not going to see Elvis Presley again until you get to the 3rd book in the series. So it's an interesting kind of conundrum, really. For me, reading this as the final part of the story, even though it's the first part of the story, it's actually really nice, because it's like you get to the end of a season of TV and you see a load of stuff from another character's perspective that sheds new light on things that had already happened, changes what you thought you knew about certain things, which is cool. I'm a fan of that. But obviously, we don't have the finale, so it's kind of it's a shame, I think. So yeah, I really like it for that reason. But I guess I'm interested in what other folks thought of that. I mean, John, yes, I was interested to see that Red finally got some page time. Yeah, because she's such a cool character, and we see her, there's a load of art material. Graham Davis wrote a really awesome, one of my favourite ads, I guess you could say, in White Dwarf history, which is like it's almost like a Hollywood Reporter profile about Red Harvest. So it's plays it totally straight, as if Red Harvest was being talked about in the news, and they were doing a profile and interviewing her, and it's great. It's just a really cool piece of like world building advertisement. Like, it's fiction, it's like a story, but it's great. Yeah, big fan of that. So it was nice to see her in the story. You do get a sense that she's a dangerous person and highly respected. Seeing as well one of her colleagues, so like Turner Harvest Ramirez, they're constantly talked about. THR constantly talked about throughout. So seeing another one of those, so we obviously see Red Harvest, but we see Turner as well. So it does make me feel like they would have been a major part of that final story. I think there's also, in some of the other novels, like prophecies that talk about different people being relevant, and one of them is about someone red being very relevant. So presumably Red Harvest. So yeah, very, very, very cool for that reason. We also get insight into this Pale Rider. So in the other stories, you occasionally encounter this mysterious horseman. So someone who is out there in the deserts riding a horse, which is weird because everyone else is in cars and on motorcycles. So you kind of get this strange thing where this character is about. He steps in and sort of saves the day in one of the other novels and helps one of our characters get away from a robot. I think it's Nathan Stack who he helps in Demon Download. So you kind of get this like, okay, there's a guy out there who is doing good. He's the Lone Ranger, basically. But we don't know who he is. We don't know what his story is. And we never find out. Because again, presumably this was something for the conclusion of the cycle. My assumption, and I'm very open to suggestions from anybody else who has read this book, my assumption is that this is Hendrik Shatner, one of the two brothers who were introduced in the sort of prologue set in the 1880s or 1840s or whenever it was. One of them is Joseph Shatner, who goes on to found the Josephite religion at the urging of Elder Seth, who is ageless. And then the other brother is Hendrik, who basically becomes the hatchet man for the Josephites. So he does a load of killing, does a load of murdering, and that is... But he also gets a glimpse of this sort of magic mirrored shades. He sees some of the darkness. Their other friend, Edgar Allan Poe, Eddie, also wears the shades that show him the truth of the universe. It sort of drives him mad. So you kind of get this fun alternate history where Edgar Allan Poe had these visions of darkness gifted to him by Elder Seth, and that prompted some of his fiction writing. But Hendrik Shatner, he becomes this murderer on behalf of the Josephites, but he also has his faith waver. And he's kind of like, I'm not sure about this. I don't really want to be involved. There's a lot of killing going on. Maybe I just want to walk away. And he does walk away, but eventually he's sort of brought back into the fold by Elder Seth and kind of forced to be a part of this. So my assumption, because that's completely unresolved, that's literally the prologue. It establishes Joseph and the creation of the religion, and then he is killed. Joseph is martyred, and that kind of starts the ball rolling on the brethren of Joseph becoming a major religion. But Hendrik, he does some of this murdering and he tries to get away, and then he can't, and then that is the end of his story. So yeah, my assumption is that he would have been the Pale Rider because of his exposure to Elder Seth, because of his exposure to the mirrored shades. Perhaps he lives forever as well, and he's still around, still on his horse, and he's doing some good deeds. I also wonder if he killed the Knock'em Sock'em robots. I don't know. But so I think that's kind of that story. But there's all of these mysteries. They're still there. All of these hanging threads that are just totally unresolved. We don't know. And it's so sad. It's so sad. It's such a good book. It as a world, it's so interesting. I mean, not only does it just read super smooth, it's so quick to read. It's so exciting. There's so much cool stuff in here. Every page you're introducing a new concept. I can understand why some folks might find it don't want to say overwhelming. I don't think it's ever overwhelming as such, but it's such a pop culture infused sort of dystopian sci-fi that's drawing on a lot of stuff. So if you don't like the stuff it's drawing on, or the style of storytelling that is just like bang, 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 then you might not get on board with it. But I think it's magnificent. Absolutely brilliant. Genuinely great. Anvil, look forward to seeing Poe again if you read enough Anno Dracula books. Okay, that's fun. Yeah, I'm Anno Dracula is high on my list. I want to get that read this year. There's a few books that I'm really eager to make sure that I do read by the end of this year. Anno Dracula is one. Richard Matheson's Hell House is one. And I also want to make sure that I read the graphic novel that the television show Kingdom is based on. And I'm just going to do a little tangent for you because I started rewatching Kingdom last night. This was a Netflix TV show that is set in the Joseon period of Korean history. So this is like medieval Korea. I think that would be the right timeline. And it is a political drama that has like intensely political, like palace coups and the rivalry between the sort of the crown prince and the leader of the sort of government on behalf of his father. But it's also a zombie show. So basically the king is dead, but has been brought back to life as a zombie, and they're trying to cover that up and stop people from finding out about it whilst this coup takes place. But unfortunately, there's a zombie outbreak elsewhere as a direct result of this thing happening. Man, it's so good. It's really, it's dark. It's a great horror show. Fantastic. But it's based on a Korean graphic novel called Kingdom of the Gods. So I'm excited to read that. So those are three of my big. There's quite a few other books on my reading list, but those are three of my really big ones that I definitely want to make sure I get read. Martha has arrived, folks, in case anybody was wondering. John, hadn't thought of the rider as one of the Shatners, but good call. I thought it was more of a Lone Ranger archetype or a Clint Eastwood spaghetti western character. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think that's absolutely what they're going for. But I also think the twist in the tale for that will be a character we know. At first, I thought it was. I actually thought when I was reading them in chronological order, because that turns up in Demon Download, and I was like, this is probably going to be Elvis then, and we'll find out that this was Elvis later on. Obviously, that doesn't happen. It was not Elvis, but I think it's somebody. I think it will be somebody we know. I think it would just be surprising for that. I don't feel like it would be that satisfying if it was just, it's Jimmy Jenkins, because you'd be like, oh, okay. So I think it will either be a famous person, famous from our world, who has been repurposed as the Lone Ranger, or it will be a character that we've seen in the stories. So I think the Shatner makes sense. Yeah, because I think John Wayne is actually is mentioned as being John Wayne. They go and see John Wayne films, so it can't be John Wayne either. Oh, speaking of Shatner as well, I think it's his 95th birthday today. So happy birthday to William Shatner, who I assume inspired the name of the Shatners in this book. Star Trek is mentioned later on. I was kind of surprised by the way in which Star Trek was deployed, because you get a sense that it still exists and it was still sort of political science fiction. I can't tell, and I may have missed it, but it doesn't clearly seem to be that different. So I don't know what the element of that story is there. But yeah, so I mean, have you guys got any sort of thoughts about the book? I kind of flown through it and kind of just got excited about certain parts of it, but like I really liked it. I think it was a very fun capper to the cycle, knowing we're not going to get the final part of the cycle. Actually getting a book that was like, okay, well, here's some extra detail about things that you've seen so far, was quite nice. Like, it was a halfway house to that having that finale. Everything that was added, although it kind of feels a little bit episodic at times, everything that was added I really liked. So I like the Blade Runner robots. I like including that. I like these extra characters who are mentioned. I'm a big fan of continuity stuff like this, so I really like that. Like Ottokar Proctor, I think it is. So like the devil doctor from Crocodile Tears is mentioned, so that like he's just mentioned as being about, and other characters who will turn up in the later stories are just mentioned either in passing, or someone is just like, oh, I don't like that guy, or that person seems really strange. So you kind of get these little bits of connective tissue. You see like Herman Katz, who runs the motel that Jazabo stays at they stay at in this particular story, but then he will reveal himself to be basically Norman Bates in Crocodile Tears. So you kind of get this that you get a Psycho homage at the start of that book. In this book now, because we have a bit more time, you get a few pages with Herman where he it kind of seeds in that he's going to be a wrong-un. So Jazabo is wearing the shades when she talks to him and looks up at his motel where his mum is in the window, and she kind of briefly gets a sort of bit of darkness comes through. So you kind of get all of this sort of stuff. I think it's great. I think I've mentioned, well, we will have mentioned it in a book club before, but Elder Seth, there's an extra line that suggests once again that Elder Seth is not necessarily a reincarnation, but a parallel carnation of Drakenfels, the Great Enchanter from the Warhammer universe, which I love. I love it. Conceptually, I think it's just totally awesome. It's almost a sort of Michael Moorcock, Eternal Champion kind of thing of just, there is a Drakenfels in every universe, and they're always evil scumbags who are proper creepos. Like, it's great. Of course, it's self-indulgent, but it's self-indulgent because all of the stuff is cool, so it's good. Hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, I because I really like it, I'm more than happy for that self-indulgence to exist. Like, I think it's fun. I think it's really fun. So yeah, really good stuff. John, I enjoyed the added post sections of the book, but found a lot of the future speak surprisingly jarring. Oh, interesting, John. So when you say future speak, do you mean the sort of the way in which the characters in those flashbacks were talking to each other, or do you mean the sort of the flash forwards, the sort of suggested prophecies, that kind of stuff? But yeah, I'd be interested to get your sense, because obviously you've got Poe and the Shatners are kind of talking to each other, and they're not. I guess they're not. It's not particularly archaic language. Is that the kind of thing that you're meaning? Yeah, I'll be interested to know. But yeah, it is. It's not the best of the Dark Future books for me. I think Comeback Tour probably is my favorite, but I think they're all great. I'm a big fan of all four of them. I think it's a great. It's such a weird. It's such a. I'm trying to pass my language here in a way that makes sense, because I think that it's a really good final part. But it's supposed to be the first part. So I don't know if it functions really well as a first part. But I tell you what it does make me do. So I've read them all in chronological release order. So I read, Route 666, and then right the way through the Demon Download Cycle and the Ghost Dancers as well. And now I've read this to finish, but because this is also the start, it makes me want to read the entire cycle again. So it's almost like a snake. It's an Ouroboros where I just want to keep going. And you're going to get to the end and it's like, oh no, but it's the start again. So like there's a really, it's kind of an odd situation there. But yeah, it fills me with an excitement to read the Demon Download Cycle again in the future. I don't think I'll jump straight into it, but it does make me want to continue the story, which again just makes it such a shame. And I'm sure we could probably fill an entire stream where we just sort of sit around lamenting the fact that there's no end to this cycle. We don't know how any of it finally plays out. man, it's brutal. It's brutal. There were a couple of other cancelled novels. So Alex Stewart, aka Sandy Mitchell, had worked on a novel that was supposed to be set in the Dark Future universe. Eugene Byrne, John, you mentioned the co-author of Back in the USSA with Newman. Eugene Byrne was supposed to be involved as well in the Dark Future novels. So there's like so much crossover there, and then so many potential stories that we just never got. Sister Chantal, who is the Vatican assassin who features in the Demon Download cycle, the Demon Download book, she was supposed to have another story as well, and she doesn't. That story doesn't exist. So it's a real kick in the teeth just to look back. I am astonished that every time I read a Kim Newman story, like from Games Workshop, I am absolutely astonished that they ever let him get away. They could have just had him writing stories forever because they're so good. But not only did they let him get away, they let him get away twice. So they had him at GW Books, and then they had him with Box Tree, and both times they cancelled all the books and let him walk away, and it's such a shame. Anvil, I liked the book. I have to admit that at the time I was reading it, I wasn't sure I thought the added pages added enough, but you're selling me on it. I do just really like this Dark Future stuff. Yeah, I mean, I get what you mean. I think part of it for me is that I want to like it. Because I really like the world. So I'm eager to enjoy it. You know, it's the final Jack Yeovil Dark Future story. And I just want it all. I want to sup all of this stuff. I want to drink it down. Because it's all just fun stuff to me. Like it is a vision of a world that I really enjoy, and just adding a bit more meat to those bones, I'm all for. You know, I imagine it's the same if you are just like madly in love with Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy. Why wouldn't you want the extended editions? Like if you get to spend an extra couple of hours every time with your guys in your world, then yeah, I can. That's what it's about for me. It's getting more time with them, and I'm all for that. John, I was trying to find the exact word, something like using censor rather than look in the modern day sections. I'm sorry, John. I'm still not 100% sure what you mean. I guess you're just. So if I'm understanding you, you mean like literally the word choice that the characters of the 1840s were using just didn't feel like it was of that time. And I can absolutely understand if that's if that can easily break immersion and can make it feel a little bit jarring. So I can completely understand that. So you would say that in terms of Dark Future books, you ain't nothing but a ground dog. Oh, yes, that's great stuff. That's great stuff. Yes, 100%. I'm absolutely more than happy to be groundhog in this cycle. I really like. That's actually something that I do find very fun. There is a huge amount of like very playful. Just repurposing names and so whether it's the name of a film or whether it's the name of a song, repurposing it into something else in this universe. So almost like there these like linguistic devices or these phrases or these terms are always going to be associated with that person, no matter what that person ends up doing. So like Elvis, his agency is called the Hound Dog Agency. You know, like you say, the Groundhog Agency as such. But then you also get, so one of the biggest Soviet singers of the era is Andrei Tarkovsky, who sang songs like Solaris. So there are these, and obviously in our world, Tarkovsky is a great director, directed loads of Soviet feature films. Jervis Johnson, if you watched my conversation with Jervis about movies that influenced Warhammer, he mentioned a Tarkovsky film, Stalker, which is apparently very, it's quite a slow burn, methodical, sort of quite deep film. Tarkovsky is relevant yet again here. So I think that's interesting. I thought it was just an interesting overlap. Lewis, I mean, imagine UK source book called Fuel Britannia. Yes, absolutely. The fact that the RPG never existed, that's so sad as well. Because I think if the RPG existed, I think it would have been popular and much loved, even if it only got one run in the early 90s. I think it's the kind of thing that would have a lot of nostalgia with it. That's the kind of thing that encourages the completion of a story. So yeah. And John, yeah, if only we'd got to read US Road Cavalry. The tentative name for that last installment. Completely agree. I mean, who knows if I need to go back and rewatch my conversation with Kim Newman, because I think he mentioned, like, obviously he mentioned elements of these stories and what might have happened, but I can't remember if he mentioned whether or not he had a copy of anything, like notes or anything like that. I feel like the Warhammer fantasy stories, I don't think there was anything at all. But I can't remember if he said that there was any of the US Cavalry book floating around. And thinking about it, it might have been Eugene Byrne who was going to write the Sister Chantal sequel. And that was the story that ended up getting lost because it was on a computer that got destroyed. And then they didn't have another copy of it. Although the final word was that a copy had been found by the Black Library, but just never released. So whether or not that does exist, it seems hard to tell for sure. But yeah. I'm trying to think of like what's my summary then of Route 666. I mean, I think it is a really good story in this universe. If you like the Jack Yeovil interpretation of Dark Future, which is a world, it's not just Mad Max, it's not just 2000 AD, it is elements of those with Blade Runner, with the Warriors, with a load of other stuff as well, and Call of Cthulhu and Lovecraft and just general, eldritch horrors. It's very much takes Mad Max and rebuilds it around the arrival of dark powers and the threat of the end of the world. And I think, for me, that's enormously compelling. It is just a really good way of raising the stakes of these stories beyond just, okay, we need to get the oil and we're going to fight those guys for the oil or the water or what have you. Don't get me wrong, there are some amazing stories that are just that. Mad Max stories, Fury Road, a recent-ish example. You can do that kind of thing and it can be amazing. And it can be all about the visuals and it can be all about the explosions and the experience. Here, Newman is like, here's a load of interesting characters from different parts of this world, and I'm going to put them all on these different tracks, and all of those tracks are going to lead to the same place, which is a showdown with the dark gods, and we're going to, it's just going to be this big thing. And this does a great job of establishing so many of those elements, of putting things in the world building, and the way in which Kim Newman does his world building, for me, enormously compelling. It's just great. It makes me want to read more stuff in this world. It makes me want to play the game. I'm always, every time I read a Kim Newman book, I'm like, I just want to get Dark Future on the table and play it. And I also, every single time, I'm like, oh man, should I just spend some time writing a fan fiction RPG? And just, obviously not for selling or anything, not for any kind of IP shenanigans, literally just because I think it would be so fun to play, just to create a hack of some other existing RPG rule system and build a Dark Future setting around it and do a couple of little adventures, because it screams out for a role-playing game. It's so good. Yes, it's tropey. It's full of tropes. It's full of borrowed stuff. It's full of references to other material. In the same way as Warhammer Fantasy and Warhammer 40,000. It is 100%, like those two properties, it is more than the sum of its parts in a fabulous way. So yeah, I just think it's such a shame that it's kind of lost. You know, it's great that there was the Auroch Digital did the Auroch Digital did the video game a couple of years ago. It's not necessarily gone. It's certainly not forgotten. I wouldn't rule out something happening with Dark Future one day again, whether that's a novel or something else. Fingers crossed, right? In the meantime, it kind of feels like, wouldn't it be great just to spend a little bit of time doing something like that? That kind of feels like the thing. I don't know if folks on here ever go to Grog Meet that takes place in Manchester every year. So this is for if you're familiar with Dirk the Dice and the chaps over at the Grog pod, but they do a retro role-playing game convention, like a mini convention every year. They do a couple online as well, and they get together in Manchester, and a load of folks can just bring a lot of different RPGs, like classic RPGs, retro RPGs, and it's just an excuse to do some classic role-playing. A day or two of classic role-playing. It feels perfect as a project for that. Or bring out your lead, I suppose. Just to create an adventure set in the Dark Future universe using a really simple rule set, but just having some fun role-playing in DF. Yeah, man, I think that would be great. I think that would be so cool. But that's the fantasy I have after reading one of these books every single time. But I think to me, that is absolutely the sign of a really good, certainly a tabletop tie-in fiction, if I can be so specific, because I want to play the game. When I read the book, it inspires me to want to play more of the game, to spend more time in the universe. And I think that that's what those books are supposed to do. My favourite Warhammer fantasy novels, when I'm reading them, I'm just thinking, wouldn't this be cool to play Woofrup right now? Wouldn't it be great to get on the table and to get some Warhammer Fantasy Battle going? Like that's, I think, that's the sign of success, I suppose. And yeah, I think that Kim Newman's books do that 100% for me. But Route 666, as a novel, Anvil, I think it's a fair shout to say, is there enough material here? These extra pages, do they add enough to this story? I would probably say, if I was being totally totally candid and I was trying to be unbiased, I would probably say no, because there's a few things in here that have been added that are essentially like red herrings or false, like they're not. They do not add to this particular story. Like the story of Jezebel and Elder Seth and Quince, the US Cavalry Sergeant, their story doesn't change or is not. You don't uncover new things by having the Knock'em Sock'em robots and things like that. That's stuff that adds to the world, certainly, but isn't in this book to help this book. That's in it to help the broader narrative, which is fine, and I would personally say is good, because I like the broader narrative. If I just wanted this novel to be as lean and tight and smart and sort of effective as it could be, some of that stuff probably wouldn't make it into this book, I guess. So, yeah, I can understand those kinds of criticisms, but that wasn't a problem for me. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it a lot. So yeah, I'm sad. I'm sad now. There's no more Dark Future for me to read. I think I've got one more Jack Yeovil short story for Warhammer Fantasy. I think the in the Silver Nails collection. So I think it's Ibby the Fish Factor. There might be another one as well. But that's more or less it. I've got a couple of short stories, basically, and all my Kim Newman Games Workshop reading will be done, which will be a sad day. I'm going to keep on with Dark Future, I think. I'm going to read... I say this, and maybe it will change when I read them, but it feels at this point in time, it feels like there's Dark Future, and that is the game, and the stuff that was released in White Dwarf, and the original novels through the Box Tree run, and that's kind of Dark Future. And then, yes, they did do some more Dark Future novels later on, and they republished them, and they amended them slightly, and There's like a couple of new stories. I think there's 4 new stories, maybe 5. That's cool. I'm going to try them, but they feel slightly different from the outside. And that's partly because Dark Future is very 90s. I think it's very of its time. As much as I completely 100% will say this is... Kim Newman could see the future, guys. He could see where culture would take us in the year 2026. He knew somehow. He knew what was coming. Or he was just a shrewd observer and extrapolator. But yeah, there's loads of stuff that's still super relevant. But also, Dark Future feels like something that was created and written in the 90s, and it's as much a response to that time as it is exploring different aspects of recent history, the 80s and the 90s. And that's one of the reasons it's so good. It feels like it's of that time looking forward, and it's great. So seeing something written in the 2000s that's kind of trying to play with that same thing, I imagine it will feel differently. It would be like if you tried to write a Dark Future novel now. I think it would just feel different. Okay, folks. I know we probably didn't dwell or drill too deep into some stuff there, but it's great. It's so good. But I think that's probably where we'll leave it. I've got a coughing fit coming on. Excuse me. So I'm going to say, let's call it there. Thank you very much for joining me. Check out my Patreon for a chance to win a couple of Dark Future books. And until next time, I will see you again. See you guys.